Well, General Sullivan, thank you very much. Also, I want to thank you for your continued outstanding leadership and support of the United States Army and all that you and the Association of the United States Army do every day in support of our great Army and the Joint Force. Also, to all of our distinguished guests here, our former retired four-star general officers who are here in attendance today. Also, I want to recognize two former AMC commanders, General Wagner and General Solomon. Both great to see you here today. Also, my neighbor here, Dick Formica. Dick, thanks again to have you here. My deputies, Pat McChristian and also John Nerger. And some of our other teammates who are here today, they'll be participating either they were on panels yesterday or will be on panels today and tomorrow. Most importantly, our industry teammates. Thank you all again for being here and all that you do every day, because the mission we have in AMC, we could not accomplish it without the great teamwork and the great partnering and the great support of industry and also our allies that are here as well and partner nations who are part of the conference today. I've often heard, and I continue to hear, we're living in interesting times. And I've heard that throughout my career. I don't think it could be more appropriate than today. These are very interesting times, very challenging times. And certainly AMC, we have our challenges that we're facing there as well. I'd like to go to the next slide and tell you what I'd like to leave you with today. First, AMC, our number one priority is to the joint warfighter. And that's what we focus on every day. There are many challenges that we face, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Certainly, physical uncertainty is one of those that's at the top of the list. But every day, I maintain focus, our command maintains focus on the joint warfighter. I recently returned from a visit to the Afghan theater of operations. Spent about a week there, visited many of the forward operating bases, and I came back and I said, not one soldier asked me about the budget. Not one question about whether they're going to get the equipment that they needed or materiel, and that was good news to me from that standpoint, because they shouldn't be worried about that, because we're going to make sure that they get what they need as the Chief of Staff of the Army is directed, and as we continue to work to ensure they have the equipment and material they need to accomplish their mission. We're in a period of, while supporting the fight, certainly we're involved in transition right now to sustainment. And part of that I'll speak to on retrograde operations. As we met with the commanders in theaters, they're still in a very, very tough fight as they transition the mission lead to the Afghan Army. So it's retrograding while in contact, and I don't think there can be any more complex mission than what we face there in the theater today. We're working our way through fiscal uncertainty. And of course, this has been, because we have been operating under a continuing resolution for 14 out of the last 28 months or so, since about FY11, it has been challenging for AMC as we try to balance mission support to the fight, reset equipment, prepare for future contingencies, and manage this unique organic industrial base that's critical to our nation. Working with our ASALT teammates, understand Honorable Hsu had a video presentation yesterday. I know that General Phillips and others have been participating, but working with ASALT, working with our program executive officers, program manager teammates, we're optimizing capabilities for Army and the Joint Force as we march towards 2020 and beyond. As the Army transitions from combat operations to a new training and readiness model where our forces are more CONUS-based, and we began to, with our rotations to our CTCs, NTC, JRTC, JMTC, and as we began to align our forces for regionally aligned forces concept that the Army has put forward. At the end of the day, our success is underpinned by our people, and I'll talk about some of our great folks that we have. Even faced with this uncertainty, they continue to contribute and give 110% every day. Every depot and arsenal I've visited, every command I've visited, every location I've visited, our folks are patriotic. They're focused on what we have to do to get the mission done. They understand the challenges that we face, but they trust the leadership that's going to try to do the right thing to take care of them. Our Chief of Staff of the Army, General Ordinary, always talks about three rheostats that he has to manage. That's in strength, modernization, and readiness. Certainly all three of those impact AMC. Our focus primarily is to ensure that our forces remain the best equipped and the most ready force the world has ever known. And so we ensure that we're working to meet those three priorities as the Chief makes decisions, as the Secretary makes decisions going forward. I'd like to show you a little video that sort of gives a view of AMC today by the numbers. Needless to say, I think you can see why I'm so humbled to command this great organization and follow on the tremendous accomplishments of the commanders before me. And all of what General Sullivan spoke about and what has taken place within this great command, which celebrated its 50th year last year, has been tremendous. And that stage was set by former commanders, a couple in the room here today, but many others that I've been privileged to be able to follow and lead. And AMC certainly has a huge contribution to our Army and the Joint Force every day. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the leadership team that we have in place. And we have an incredible team of leaders supporting AMC today. Again, I mentioned about my two deputies here and my command sergeant major and our chief of staff. But you'll see each one of the commanders there around the command, located across the United States. Tremendous leaders, an amazing talent pool, and they've got the right skill sets to help guide us through this challenging and uncertain period that we have, leading about 73,000 personnel globally. Next slide. Our presence today. Just to give you an idea, this map sort of depicts where AMC is today. Again, as I mentioned, about 73,000 dedicated AMC employees worldwide, 11 major subordinate commands, 96 battalion and brigade equivalent commands, 32 depots, arsenals, and ammunition plants. We've got an impact or presence in all 50 states, currently supporting 144 countries. We're forward deployed, as you can see, regionally aligned in support of all the combatant commands. So as the Army moves towards the regionally aligned force concept, AMC is already there. We've got a substantial presence in place, as are many other multifunctionals that have presence in those theaters, ready to provide support as our forces move, as the Army moves forward with this training concept. On October 1st of last year, AMC assumed the DOL, the Director of Logistics mission across the Army. 73 DOLs transitioned or transferred to AMC from MCOM. We've attempted to make that transition as seamless as possible. Naturally, the fiscal challenge has created some challenges there, but we're working very, very closely with TRADOC, FORCECOM, and with MCOM to continue to meet the requirements at the post-camp stations. And also the 74th DOL, Joint Base Lewis McCoy, is scheduled to transfer on 1 October of this year, pending a MOA with the Chief Staff of the Army and Chief Staff of the Air Force. But again, this AMC presence today is providing Army and joint readiness around the globe. Next slide, please. I'd like to talk about what I'm very, very proud to talk about is our national treasure, and that's the organic industrial base. And even more so, I had a great appreciation for the organic industrial base, even more so from the time I was a captain, where I remember I could send my shelters to a place called Tobyhanna. Had no idea where it was, but it would come back completely as if it was brand new, completely refurbished inside and out. And over the years, gained even a better appreciation. But since serving as the deputy commander and the commander, gained an even greater appreciation of the tremendous capabilities that our depots and arsenals provide to the nation. Not only just the United States Army, but to the nation. We've got 20 unique, one-of-a-kind facilities. Some capabilities that are not replicated in the commercial marketplace today. And what I mean by that, in sufficient time to meet readiness requirements. These depots and arsenals have surged to meet operational needs statements that have come from the theater, and in short duration have been able to turn that operational needs statement into a capability, test that capability at Aberdeen, manufacture it at Rock Island, Bluegrass, and then ship it there and add on armor, other capabilities, double V hull, other capabilities that have saved lives, and been able to do that in a short duration period of time because of the capabilities that these facilities have developed since the last almost 12 years of war. One example is Radford, Virginia, where we have the Radford Ammunition Plant, the only producer of nitrocellulose in North America, critical component of 70% of all ammo, ammunition in a brigade combat team. Watervliet, New York. It's the sole producer of in CONUS of large caliber gun tubes for the military. They'll celebrate 200 years since it was founded this coming summer. Lake City, Missouri. The only small arms manufacturer that can surge to provide wartime needs. 1.5 billion rounds a year. A capability that just wasn't in existence when we began the war. Corpus Christi, Texas. Just so impressed with CCAD, as we call it. They deliver a combat aviation company's worth of UH-60s in every 6 weeks. That's what they're capable of doing. We can't replicate that. If Sandy had gone west, as opposed to going up the East Coast and had gone up through the Gulf, I'm not certain what would happen and where we would have stood with our aviation readiness had that facility been hit by a storm. So certainly one of our tremendous capabilities. These facilities and locations are the economic engines for the local community, usually the primary employer in those communities. As you saw on the by the numbers chart, a $1.83 return on investment for every $1 invested by the Army and AMC. Most important is a patriotic professional workforce. The second and third generation artisans who learn from their father, their mother, their grandfather, their grandmother. Capability, skill sets that have been developed over many, many years of experience that you just can't replicate. You can't hire that type of experience and capability. Again, national treasures not only for the United States Army, but for the Department of Defense and for the nation. As I mentioned earlier, AMC is globally, regionally aligned. Next slide, please. And this slide depicts how we are aligned and forward deployed in support of the combatant commands. They are focused with, led on the point of the spear as our Army Field Support Brigades, We have one of those brigades in each one of the combatant commands. We have transportation brigades, contracting brigades, and other direct support personnel postured to be able to provide responsive support to the combatant commander. This regionally aligned forces is central to supporting national defense strategy, and so we can respond. We're part of the crisis action planning with those organizations. We're synchronized in their current training and operations. We also are forward positioned and postured to support the regionally aligned forces. So as the Army begins to align relationships between divisions and brigade combat teams to a particular combatant command, AMC is already postured there. We also have a very strong presence with foreign military sales. We have training teams that are training now in 144 countries, and that's also another opportunity that we can leverage, and we're ensuring that we're working with FORSCOM as we go forward. Bottom line, this presence will ensure the Army's responsiveness to the combatant commander requirements, enabling our ability to prevent, shape, and win across the globe. Next slide. This is our portfolio, and of course, when we look at our portfolio, the way we identify these capabilities across our command is that we provide, in terms of prevent, the Army provides a credible land force that can fight and win to deter adversaries. AMC's contribution to this is first and foremost readiness, to ensure our forces are ready to meet any future contingency. We're able to do that through the organic industrial base that I just spoke about. Foreign military sales, where we leverage partner capacity, we build interoperability, and we also have presence. Again, this is all about the readiness of our forces to meet the next contingency. We're able to shape, where the Army provides a sustained and stabilizing presence. And as I mentioned before, AMC is already postured for regionally aligned forces. We have globally networked our logistics capabilities, and we're sustaining our Army preposition stockage and leveraging those capabilities to meet requirements in the COCOMs as well as contingency requirements for the future. And then CORD is part of WIN, which is the Army provides a robust capacity that is responsive to the combatant commanders. AMC will coalesce all the capabilities in our portfolio to support the joint fight, to ensure that our force is in a position to win. Next slide. One example I talked about previously is security assistance and foreign military sales. That's led by United States Army Security Assistance Command. It has global reach, operating in all combatant commands and Army Service Component Commands. There is a growth in demand for training, and what we're seeing across as we continue to deliver these capabilities through foreign military sales. We also offer the opportunity for our training to go in, and we think this is an opportunity we can leverage as we continue to build partner capacity and build relationships with our allies and partner nations. In FY12, $19.6 billion, which remains at historically high levels, projected this year for $12.2 billion. And what I'm finding in my travels as I meet with both in embassies and I meet with our foreign militaries is that they have trust in the equipment that the United States provides to them. Certainly I leverage every opportunity to push for a sustainment package as well. Because of course the equipment when it arrives, being a new set of equipment, that's great, but at some point in time it's going to have to be sustained, it's going to have to be maintained. And so we try to leverage that capability to utilize our depots and arsenals as a way to, through foreign military sales, that we can preserve the organic industrial base and the skill sets that we have. And that's been a win-win for both the United States Army and our allies as well, and also a win-win for industry. And again, we see this as continuing. In the out years, this is a growth industry. And that's what General Dale Turner, who leads that force, that's what he's predicting as we go forward, and that's what I'm seeing in my travels as I travel around the world. I think the quality assurance that we provide through our foreign military sales and the capabilities that we deliver very much appreciated. It affects all COCOMs, and as I mentioned, also supports our regional line force strategy and having interoperable sets of equipment or like items, if you will, in terms of spare parts and so forth. Next slide. But at the end of the day, what we deliver at AMC through equip, sustain, integrate, and enable is Army and Joint Readiness. That's what we deliver every day. That's what we focus on delivering, leveraging all the capabilities that we have across the command. When we look at AMC's scorecard, what's reflected in the blue and maybe a little challenging for you to see, that's what was accomplished in FY12. An amazing amount of work, 3 times the workload of Vietnam, 24 Brigade Combat Team equivalents that were reset in FY12. Depicted in yellow and the star clusters there is what's planned for FY13. We know that's going to be impacted based on the direction of cancellation orders in the 3rd and 4th quarter, and we're working our way through that. And what that impact will be on readiness to the formations that are scheduled to have that equipment reset. But thanks to our partners in industry, we've continued to meet the surge, to meet requirements over the last almost 12 years of war. We've also worked with the other services and doing reset work for them in our depots and arsenals, as you can see reflected down in the bottom right-hand side, that direct support the other services, $5.2 billion since FY03 to 12. And so we're doing quite a bit of work also for the Air Force, Navy, and the Marines at our depots and arsenals. And again, the challenge that we have, 13, as you know, is that with the planned cancellation of new work orders for the 3rd and 4th quarter, that's going to impact on 6 Army divisions worth of equipment. Result in about 1,000 tactical wheeled vehicles that we will not be able to, that will be delayed readiness and being able to reset those. About 14,000 communications devices. So we have teams that go out and reset SINGAR's radios, primarily other C4ISR items. Those will be delayed. About 17,000 weapons. And so that's the impact that we see in the 3rd and 4th quarter right now, and delayed readiness of that equipment to those particular 6 divisions. Next slide. As I mentioned, of course, enormous mission force is the retrograde from Afghanistan. As I mentioned, the commanders there still in a very, very tough fight, but they have fully embraced retrograde as an operational mission. And because the commanders set the priorities on the ground, and we're always going to meet what the commanders have laid out as their requirements and their priorities. But by embracing retrograde as an operational mission, they will help us as we prioritize the equipment to leave the theater. They'll prioritize non-mission essential equipment that we can remove from the theater, and we've got processes in place to be able to do that. About $28 billion worth of equipment there, $22 billion we're looking to return to the United States for Army readiness for the future. I was very impressed that we have the processes in place or the lessons learned from OIF and OND. Certainly Afghanistan is not Iraq. We know we just cannot just push it across the border and then sort it out at the end of the day. We have to fly a lot of equipment out. We're seeing a little bit of thawing on the PAC GLOC. We're beginning to move some equipment there, not to the levels that we need, of course, and not to the levels that we previously enjoyed over a year ago. But we're beginning to see some movement there, and of course the Northern Distribution Network. We're using multimodal and all means to be able to get the equipment out. The key is velocity and throughput to ensure that we leverage every asset leaving the theater to be able to retrograde equipment back. But in terms of the processes, the people in place, when I was there last year in January, what would probably take about 90 days to process a vehicle once it arrived at the RPAT yard, that's where we position equipment before we ship it out, they've now got their process down under 12 days. And believe they can do so even quicker because of the facilities that they put in place and the processes and lessons learned from the OND retrograde. So again, we think we'll be able to meet what the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army has laid out of priorities of the equipment to come out Challenge, of course, again, with fiscal uncertainty and sequestration is the challenge with second destination transportation. And we're working our way through that as well as we began to be. So that will delay. If we're talking about the timeline we've been given to get the equipment out by the end of December 2014, the challenge there again is that as you begin to retrograde, the costs increase. And that's where you've heard the department talk about the OCO shortfall, because it increases our transportation costs as we'll begin to surge equipment coming out of the theater as we did surging equipment to go in. And so that's the challenge that we face going forward. But again, very impressed with our soldiers, our civilians, and our contractor workforce that are there getting after this mission. Next slide. I know sequestration has been on the mind of and the topic of discussion. And I'd briefly like to tell you what the impact that we see with AMC. Sequestration, along with the continuing resolution, the CR, as Guy Swan just talked about, again, 14 months out of the last 28 since FY11. That's where we've been operating on the CR. And that's challenging in the business that we do because we have to have predictability. As we work with our global supply chain, there are long lead items that we have to order. And that's based on the timeline of when we see equipment come in. The processes that we have in place within the command now, we can track equipment from the time it's turned in from a forward operating base in a theater all the way back to the depot, and we can predict where it's going to go in 6 months and how it will contribute to the readiness of that particular organization. However, that's all predictive. We have a timeline that we have associated with it, and anytime that's disrupted, it takes a period of time to get that back, sometimes 1 to 3 years, once we begin to disrupt that process that we have. It will impact on every AMC command and organic industrial base facility, with the exception of those activities that are in direct support of combat operations, and that's units that are deployed, units preparing to deploy. They will not be impacted. We'll ensure we'll meet their requirements. It'll result in cancellation of depot maintenance, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, as directed by the department for the third and fourth quarter. And that'll have second and third order effects. Because when you cancel that type of workload for 2 quarters at the end of the year, when we often have a surge in the amount of work that we do in the fourth quarter, that will exacerbate this situation as we go down the road. I already mentioned that it will result in a delay of readiness, equipment readiness for 6 Army divisions. It'll result in work stoppages at some of our depots, arsenals, and maintenance activities. The most immediate impact is at the Director of Logistics, because, of course, they're at the post camps and stations, and so they have, of course, the capabilities to provide immediate repair and readiness above unit level. They will be impacted the most. That's the most immediate impact that we'll see. And, of course, as I talked about, post-combat equipment repair, 4,000 vehicles, tactical vehicles, wheel vehicles, 14,000 communication devices, and 17,000 weapons. It'll cause a reduction in the purchase orders to our business partners and vendors across the country. We do work with about 3,000 companies, everything from large, medium, to small, sometimes just very, very small, mom and pop operations that have developed a capability or a niche that meets a requirement. It'll impact, because we'll have to cancel some of those orders, we'll have to reduce some of those orders, and then, of course, those companies will be impacted depending on how heavily leveraged they are in defense. The greatest risk for me as a commander is losing this critical workforce that we've developed over the last 12 years. As I mentioned, the second and third generation artisans, these are tremendously talented people. I was up at Waterville Elite, and up there they tested the strength of a cannon. You know, it comes out of the, about 3,000 degrees as it's going down the line. Good place to stand in the wintertime. But as you see it go through all the processes, there's one station where it stops and they have some type of press that tests the strength of the steel. And there is a machine there that certainly the artisan looks at, but he tested by listening. And where we think it's going to crack, he said, no, it's still good. because he's been doing that for 20, 30, 40 years, and his father did it before him. So that's the type of skill sets that we have out there. When you go down to Corpus Christi, you see the folks working on crash battle damage helicopters. And you see it on one end, it says, no way they're going to be able to repair that. And you see it out on the other end, and it looks as if it's brand new. That's the capability they develop. That's that skill set that we cannot hire. And so I'm greatly concerned about that. Our scientists and engineers, because of the war, we've had some folks patriotic that want to sign up and support the Army and the Department of Defense. And so we brought in a lot of young folks with great ideas and great minds and innovative ways of doing things. And of course, you know, when we're having to reduce our temporary term employees, we lose some of those folks. We're on a hiring freeze, and where we would traditionally select from that group of talented temps and terms to replace some of our retiring personnel, that's a great loss. So at the end of the day, scientists, engineers, contracting professionals. In 2009, we didn't have a contracting command. We now have a contracting command headed by a two-star general now, and Camille Nichols, and we've got an expeditionary contracting command. And it takes about 5 to 7 years to develop the skill sets to be a experienced contracting professional, to ensure we're getting the best value on the dollars that we're spending and ensure we're writing the type of contracts to meet the need of the warfighter. It takes time for all the certifications, all the other requirements. We don't want to lose that skill set. We did not have that skill set at the beginning of the war. There'll be future contingencies, and we must maintain. So for me, that's the greatest impact, is losing people, because they're very hard to replace, and it's very hard to train. And when we're in a period where we cannot hire, hiring freeze, and having to let our temps and terms go, contractors, it puts us in a very precarious situation. And again, these reductions were already, these were after we had already had previously planned reductions, because after every war we know we're going to see workload decline. Pre-2003, we had about 16 million direct labor hours in our depots and arsenals. That peaked in 2008 to about 38 million direct labor hours. 2013, the President's budget, we had projected 30 million direct labor hours. Sequestration adds another 6. So you can see the challenge that we have. We already had a strategically planned, responsibly balanced approach to how we would go from the peak of 2008 to what we could see out to 13 and really out to 18 as we reset the force coming out of the war. We knew we would go back down. Sequestration removes all the flexibility for us because it compresses that timeline now, as opposed to having a period of time, 3 to 5 years, to be able to spread that out. It happens immediately here in 13. So that's the challenge that we face. Next slide. However, there are some opportunities, and I don't want to leave here without, especially with this group, tell you about the opportunities. We recently had our Army Organic Industrial Base Strategic Plan that was approved by the Undersecretary of the Army on 15 October. And this takes a holistic approach focused on the health of the organic industrial base. We recognize the critical importance of the organic industrial base to the nation and to the Army. And so the intent is to provide a common management framework to help us focus our resources to meet requirements and the core workload capability that we must preserve in our depots and arsenals. And it also encourages the use of public-private partnerships. And we really want to talk with you about that, because we think there are opportunities there for public-private partnerships that can help both industry and the Department of Defense and the Army as we move forward. Our depots and arsenals are not the depots and arsenals of pre-9/11. With the retooling and investments that we've made, some have become the benchmark. And so we think there are opportunities there that we can continue with public-private partnerships. We currently have 349 businesses that we're involved with public-private partnerships. about $218 million worth annually, supports approximately 2,500 jobs. And we think this maximizes capabilities that we have in our depots and arsenals and what we want to preserve going forward, but also is an opportunity to continue that great partnership and alignment that we have with industry. And so we welcome your ideas and recommendations. We've established an office there at the headquarters. We're in the process of establishing an office at the headquarters. And my ombudsman, Jesse Barber, is here today. But we're looking at stand up an office there at the headquarters that we can interface, and it will look at public-private partnerships and how we can better improve on that, as well as continuing what we're doing with small business. Last year we did $12 billion, I think, in small business. So in AMC, small business is big business. And so we want to ensure that we continue to work in those lanes as well. Again, we talked about increased manufacturing workload, and again, we think there's opportunities to do that based upon the investments that we've made in our facilities. And then, of course, foreign military sales is a win-win-win for the Army, for our allies, and also for industry. And again, we think there are tremendous opportunities there in terms of sustainment opportunities, sales, sustainment, and training. And so we want to continue to move forward with that as well. And part of the foreign military sales, what we've been able to do with some of the systems that we've had out at Sierra Army Depot, great facility, great capability out there, was able to visit here recently, is as we pull equipment from that location for foreign military sales, we're able to use our industrial base facilities to bring it up to speed or reset it as we participate in the foreign military sales program. And last year, 872,000 direct labor hours went into FMS support. So again, that's another capability we want to leverage to help us through this period of time of fiscal uncertainty. Next slide. And again, in spite of all the looming threat, sequestration, and fiscal uncertainty, the one thing we're focused on is that we'll never let the warfighter down. AMC has earned the trust. AMC patch is trusted by our soldiers and by our allies and by our teammates. And it took many, many years to gain that trust, and we don't want to lose that trust. And so we'll ensure that they have what they need. If they're deployed in harm's way, or if they're preparing to deploy in harm's way, they will get the equipment and material they need to accomplish their mission. That's our commitment. I talked about the top talent that we have. Although I showed you at the beginning our commanders, command sergeant majors, and our civilian leadership, it's really the folks that are reflected on this slide. Those folks are out there doing the heavy lifting every day in our depots and arsenals. I think it's stated about 83% of our folks outside of Washington, D.C. They're working out in small towns, doing the work that we need to do to support our nation. All focused, dedicated to taking care of the warfighter, and just a privilege to be able to serve with. Next slide. So I believe where I started with you. Again, we're going to maintain focus and priority on the warfighter. We'll work our way through, and we'll utilize the resources we're given to the best of our abilities to meet the warfighter's needs in accordance with the department priorities. Again, fully engaged in the current fight, but we are transitioning to sustainment. And that is a challenging period, and we have to focus as much as it goes to transitioning to sustainment. And we want to ensure that we're doing that as we have units return to CONUS, do home station training as they begin to rotate to our National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center, and decisive action type rotations. There's a different type of maintenance set. As we build training sets and capability sets in Europe and other parts of the world for our forces as they rotate as part of Regional Line Force. And so we're all of that part of transition for the systems that are non-standard system or non-program of record systems that are converted to a program of record or a transition to sustainment. We know that 60 to 70% of a life cycle cost in a weapon system or any type of system platform is in the sustainment phase. And so we have to work our way through with the number of programs that we have, about 150 that began transitioning this year to sustainment across the Army. Fiscal uncertainty impacts us all, and we're working our way through it. And again, our success clearly is underpinned by the great people that we have in AMC. So with that said, next slide. At the end of the day, it's all about the soldier. I'll take your questions. The question is, regarding readiness, can we make do with the legacy test maintenance systems fielded at our depots, or does the expense of sustaining those systems inform immediate need to fund the next generation of test and maintenance systems? I think because our systems have become so complex, I spend a lot of time on post-production software support because our systems are complex. When you look at what was on a Humvee when we went into the war and what you see that's on an MRAP today, especially C4ISR systems, I think we have to, as we transition those systems to sustainment, we have to look at the maintenance and test equipment that we have and how we'll posture ourselves to be able to reset that equipment and sustain that equipment. Because again, we've had these capabilities either in equipment that's theater provided, or and many of those systems have remained in theater, but as they begin to come back, I think the question is, the answer is yes. We're going to have to look at how we invest in our testing and maintenance equipment that we have for those select type of systems. And part of that process will be as the Army makes decisions on which systems are going to transition to a program of record, then we'll look at what we have to invest for the life cycle sustainment. Next question, please. That's it. Well, I thought I'd get quite a few. Okay. Well, again, thank you all. General Sullivan, thank you again, sir, for the opportunity to be here today and share a few thoughts with you. Most importantly, I want to thank you for the great support that you all provide. These forums are very important for us, for AMC. 97% of our command, 96% of our command is civilian, and 4% military. Our engagement with industry is critical, and so we'll continue to try to find means to be able to engage with you. I invite you to come to Huntsville or visit any of our what we call centers of excellence, whether that's at Rock Island, Warren, or at Aberdeen Proving Ground. But again, to see the work that we're doing and the challenges that we face. But I appreciate your great support. We know we got to work our way through this, but I think working together and teaming as we've done, we'll find a way to get through. Thank you all very much.